You like movies about gladiators?
Those men wanted to have sex with me!
Great Scott!
Nice beaver.
He's a Cinderella boy.
Rambo is a pussy.
Come with me if you want to live.
Hello, and welcome to Retro Ramble. I'm Charlie McGee.
I'm George McGee.
And this week, we're going to be going back to the 1980s classic, The Goonies. So, George, where does one start when we go back to a film that means so much to the both of us?
Well, shall I give our listeners a brief recap, even though it seems a bit pointless because I'm sure that everyone and their dog has seen this film. But anyway, I'll go with a brief synopsis. So, in order to save their homes from being turned into a golf resort, a group of misfits set out on a dangerous adventure to find a pirate's hidden treasure, all the while being pursued by a family of criminals known as the Fratellis.
And so, George, what are we going to cover in this episode? We're going to do our usual sort of setup. We'll take a look at we'll probably start talking about some of our memories, yeah?
Yeah, so, we'll just do our usual thing. So, first memories, background production, and then we'll just jump straight into the film. And, what are our favourite moments, what works, what doesn't, and probably spoiler alert, there's not very much that goes wrong in this film. It's pretty well done.
Yeah, and just to add, watching these films before you listen to this podcast is not essential, especially with a film like The Goonies. We're going to talk about how it stands up today and how it's relevant. So, George, have you got the mini discs ready?
I'm actually using Laserdisc for this episode.
All right, you've moved up. Okay, so we're
moved down, perhaps, but they look pretty cool.
Yeah, got to get yourself a Philips. I think there was only one company who made them. Anyway, so we'll cue that up. Ready and go.
They call themselves the Goonies. They've stumbled onto a legend, but they're not alone.
Chunk, I hope that was your stomach.
Discover what they uncover.
It was rubies and emeralds and diamonds.
The lost map, the secret caves.
Hey, Mikey! You can hear me! Run! Run! They're coming after you!
Join the adventure as Steven Spielberg presents The Goonies, a Richard Donner film.
So, George, The Goonies, who brought us this amazing cult classic?
It's a funny one. Looking at, as the credits rolled up when I started watching this film, the amount of names that came up, I was just like, crikey, there's a lot of talented people involved in this. So, it's directed by Richard Donner, and Richard Donner is probably one of the most versatile blockbuster directors of all time, I would argue. The same man brought us The Omen, Superman the movie, well, Superman 1 and 2, most of Superman 2, but that's a different story. He gave us this film, and he also gave us Lethal Weapon. So he's very, very versatile, very, talented director. It's produced and story by a guy called Steven Spielberg. And never heard of him. And it's written by Christopher Columbus. No, not the man that discovered America. It's Chris Columbus, who is, again, got a great family film pedigree. So he wrote Gremlins. He wrote and directed Home Alone. He wrote this film. Whilst it's probably seen as one of the weakest installments, but he's the man that launched the Harry Potter franchise. So he directed the first Harry Potter film, so he got that all sort of in motion before he passed it on to a host of other directors that built on what that world that he created. And then finally, it's executively produced by Kathleen Kennedy, who is currently head of Lucasfilm, churning out buckets of money for the Star Wars franchise at the moment.
Printing their own.
Printing their own money and firing directors left, right and centre by the sounds of it. and Frank Marshall as well, who I think is Kathleen Kennedy and Frank Marshall are married or partners. And Frank Marshall, again, is a very big producer in Hollywood, and he is most recently the man responsible for producing the box office giant Jurassic World, which I think until sort of recently was the biggest opening film of all time, or biggest, quickest to get to $1 billion. It seems like that record's broken every year now, or every few months. So all in all, what I would probably call, it's like they are the Avengers of blockbuster filmmaking. It's quite a collection of talent behind the camera.
Yeah, and, just what I can say in terms of preparation for covering this film, obviously we know the film very well, but when I was surfing through Amazon, I came across the making of a cult classic, which I will be referring to as we go through this, and that's definitely worth checking out. That's on Amazon Video. And one of the first things that stood out for me was something that we obviously wouldn't have been aware of when this film came out, as we weren't the cinephiles that we were just the kids consuming this film, was the anticipation behind this, because everyone was like, Richard Donner and Spielberg together. I mean, they were giants of the time, so it's not just now that you can say those names and say these guys were good. They were proven even back then. Yeah,
well, that's it. I mean, it's interesting to see that. I mean, I don't think Richard Donner's doing as much, and maybe Chris Columbus to a lesser extent, but Spielberg, Kathleen Kennedy, Frank Marshall, I'd say they're all still very active and still making, quite an impact in Hollywood on the blockbuster scene. So, yeah, it's 32 years later, is it? They're still sort of kings of the box office.
So, George, first memories of watching this film?
It's a tough one. I've been racking my brains, and I've seen this film so many times. I don't have a definitive memory of where I first saw it. Probably we've mentioned it in the past. It's possibly at our old next door neighbours, the Glendinings. That's more than likely, especially as it had Corey Feldman, who was the Glendinings were a huge fan of Corey Feldman.
Who wasn't a fan of Corey Feldman back in the 80s, though, George? Him and Corey Haim, the two Coreys, what a run they had.
What a run indeed, for all of about 4 years.
Well, it's funny you say that, because now I think we watched this film. I remember watching this at our place, but yeah, I do have distinct memories. I think the first time I watched this was at the Glendinings. They had an amazing video collection. I think they were in the films and their dad was in the films. They had the setup, and so that's why I think we became. It was a lot to do with why we got into watching films so much. But that's my recollection. But obviously, I remember watching this at home and over the years. But I haven't watched it for ages. I watched it recently, obviously in preparation for this, but it's such a special film. It's very well made. And we were just talking about Richard Donner and Spielberg. Was it the golden age of Spielberg? Films like this and E.T., it was a great time for these sort of films.
Well, yeah, he was hot, probably the hottest thing, Untouchable by that stage, in terms of, especially that kid-friendly blockbuster. E.T. is a great sort of kindred spirit to this film. There's obviously there's a lot of themes, Spielberg themes, that carry over into this. And I think there's also rumours that whilst he was producing it, he also actually probably directed a bit of it as well. I think it was Sean Astin who said in what
he was second unit director, but he stepped in to help me. That's from the making of video. So that was about time constraints, but he could do it, and he just did it, and that's the type of director he is.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a funny one. This film does just, in terms of what we do on this podcast, in terms of Retro Ramble, it is all about going back to the films that we love and that lovely, hug that nostalgia offers us. And it seems like this film is just the sort of, complete, what's the word I'm thinking of? This film is the encapsulation of that. This film is such a great film for nostalgia, for that yearning of what it's like to be a kid, the fun that the adventures that you go on, and that looking for adventure, and it's proper wish fulfillment. And for kids growing up, and that's why we probably watched it so much, and that's why it's so great to go back and watch it now. It just does, it sort of really grabs you and pulls you in, and it's without sounding corny, it's almost quite magical in a way.
Well, yeah, I think also because, we'll talk about this later about how it stands up today and what films are like in terms of the amount of films like this that are still coming out. But what strikes me is that this, because of the timescales of taking a film to be out of the cinema and then to be on video and how long that would stay relevant in our lives, that the Goonies was a part of our lives and connected to many memories for a long time. And there's also this great thing, which I'm going to call music memory. So, like how you have muscle memory where you just remember how to do, your body just instinctively remembers how to do something. Yeah. I find with these films, because there's so much nostalgia, there's so many memories linked to the soundtracks of these films. Like, there's just moments in this film where a certain bit of music will kick in and suddenly I'm transported back, so it's the senses and it's all of those things. And yeah, it's a great trip down memory lane. So regardless of when the Goonies came into your life, I think it's, it encapsulates that time and very much, it's the era that we're looking back at. So, should we dive in? We'll do our usual, we'll try and
we've got there essentially. Like that was going to be my first point. You're talking about music, and this film has a terrific opening. It's completely over the top, and it's only just watching it again recently that you see how sort of unrealistic, and the fact that you've got this you've got the Fratelli brother Fran Sanchez, what's he called, Robert Davi, escaping from the worst guarded prison in the world. He knocks out one guard and then he's out of the prison.
How does he get out at the end? It's because I was like, all right, I forgot, because it's been so long since I watched this. I was like, oh yeah, of course there's the escape thing. And I was like, are they both, and my memory's going, are they both the brothers in prison? And then it's like, oh yeah, he's got the thing with the water pipe. Mm-hmm. And then he just walks out. I'm like, what?
He walks out, and the other Fratelli brother, a great character actor, Joe Pantoliano, or affectionately known as Joey Pants.
It'd be easier, I think, if we refer to him for that episode as Joey Pants or Joey P.
Yeah, Joey Pants. I think that's how he's affectionately known in Hollywood. He's the guy that's probably best known for playing Cypher in the Matrix film. And yeah, he's in Memento as well. I always remember that bit as a kid where he's like pouring the gasoline or petrol for our UK listeners around the car park of the prison. And I actually watched in preparation for this, I watched Cinema Sins. It's a channel on YouTube, and it's actually it's a bit of a overly cynical thing, but it's basically a guy that analyzes classic films and points out all the mistakes and errors. And the Goonies, I say, this opening is full of them. So yeah, why is there no one manning the prison? The flames that he lights, they're about like a foot high, and all the police are like, what do we do? What do we do? And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's loads of police in cars chasing after them, firing on this vehicle in a quite busy, small little, seaside town. And I'm thinking, that seems a little bit overkill from having a really poorly manned prison to, a full sort of like, almost turning into, it's like even in the Blues Brothers, you've got the whole state chasing after them, but no one's really firing on them. But part of that opening, I say it's over the top. It draws you in, and it's got that great soundtrack, that great sort of orchestral music. And I looked up, I had to look up the composer because I was like, who is this guy? It's with Spielberg's involvement, you would usually assume it's John Williams, but I was fairly certain it wasn't John Williams, and it's actually a guy called Dave Grusin, who I've never heard of, but he's done some big films, so he's composer behind The Graduate, the film Tootsie, and he was Oscar nominated for his soundtrack for the John Grisham film The Firm. It's a really iconic soundtrack, and as you say, that just hearing those opening bars of the soundtrack, it does just take you back, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to say. My first sort of music memory moment was just the bit with the Mama Fratelli sitting in the car and saying, dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
And it's like this chase music. And then suddenly my memories kick in and it all appears in my head. I know exactly what's coming next. But I'd forgotten the scene, and the music jolts me, and apparently the story behind why Robert Davi and Joey Pants were selected to be the brothers was that on day one when they first met, Robert Davi called out Joey Pants on wearing a toupee in real life.
Oh, wow.
It was like the first time they'd ever met, and he said, is that a hairpiece? And they just started like squabbling from the off. They were frosty with, and even in the making of video, Davi's got sunglasses on the entire time, and Joey Pants is saying, yeah, I still don't really see eye to eye with Robert Davi, and I think that's probably what they brought to the film, and the fact he has to jump through the sunroof. And apparently I don't know where dollar bills fitted into this, but apparently the fire was supposed to be lit by a flaming dollar bill for some reason, but it just didn't work. And Davi was like, why don't we just shoot it? So, great opening scene. My only question is when Mama Fratelli says, don't worry, you can count on your mum, and she puts it in 4-wheel drive, it's like, was the breakout completely scheduled to intercede with a beach 4x4 race?
Well, I think we should put a link, even though I say it's quite cynical, we'll put a link into the Cinema Sins video, because it picks up on all that, like, can you really spark petrol by firing a bullet at it? Yeah. How have they timed the prison escape with the start of this cross beach 4x4 race? There's a lot of coincidences going on, but it's to its strength, it's great. It introduces all the main characters. So you see Data trying out his wonky gadgets. You've got Chunk being Chunk. So yeah,
it's great introduction of all the characters. Nice, quick little beats. A little bit here, a little bit there.
Yeah, and the thing I love, within 5-10 minutes, and it will tie into, they don't make them like they used to. We've got drug references, swearing, and dick jokes. You certainly wouldn't get that in a kids' film these days, a PG-rated film.
Oh, you idiot! You put it on upside down!
Dork! If God meant to do it that way, you'd all be pissing in your faces.
Looks fine to me.
Great establishment of the characters, all their quirks and tics. You've got, as I say, you've got the good squabbling between the Fratelli brothers, which I really enjoyed, and I forgot about how good that they are together, that sort of fighting. The squabbling between, Josh Brolin and Sean Astin, Mikey and Brandon. That, it's nice that, it's not just the, oh, I'm the thuggish older brother and I'm going to bully you. You can sense that genuine affection.
Yeah, it's really well done. I mean, is that the Spielberg effect? That's what I felt when I saw this. I was like, he really gets it right. He hits the sweet spot. You cannot say that I'm sure it's when it comes at the end of the film, you're like, oh, it's too much corny, it's too cheesy. And you could accuse him, but I don't know, just when you're getting through the start of these films, he seems to strike just the right balance.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of credit is due to Richard Donner, that he's working with practically a bunch of unknowns, a bunch of child actors that have never been in a feature film before. So even Josh Brolin, even though he's from sort of, his dad's James Brolin, so he's from sort of cinematic royalty as such. This was his first feature film. And all the other kids, obviously, the Jonathan Key Kwan, I think it's pronounced, the guy who plays Data, was Short Round in Temple of Doom.
Where's he now?
Indeed. I think, I think I read somewhere that he is involved he's like a martial arts choreographer for films. I think he's still in films, but he works, behind the scenes.
We will find out. We will put it on the blog. We will find out.
Well, yeah, no, there's a great feature we'll put on the blog for Empire did a reunion, a 25-year reunion with all the cast. And I think most surprisingly is the guy that plays Chunk is lost all the weight and he's now like a high-powered entertainment lawyer. Yeah,
I saw that on the making of video. I was like, what's happened to Chunk, and why is that Samwise Gamgee from Lord of the Rings keep talking like he was in the film? I don't even like Samwise Gamgee wasn't in this film. There was a little kid called Mikey, And then there's a guy called Samwise Gamgee. George, I mean, are they related? Is he speaking for? I mean, it can't be the same guy.
Well, that's it. I was telling people some friends were asking, what film you covering next on the podcast, and I was like, oh yeah, we're covering the Goonies, and they were like, sort of typical response, oh, I love that film, and I was like, yeah, if you think it's actually got some people that child actors that are still working today, obviously. Josh Brolin is still pretty hot, getting a lot of work and in big films at the moment. I said, but yeah, a lot of people forget you've got Sean Astin, who is, best known as Mr. Frodo, Samwise Gamgee, and my friends are like, "Oh Christ, yeah, it is, isn't it?" So yeah, it's.
Was he the same guy? Was he the same guy who was in Toy Soldiers as well?
Yeah. So he did Toy Soldiers. I think what else did he do? I made a note of it somewhere, or maybe I did not. But yeah, he was in Toy Soldiers, and I think he was in something else that was a classic film that we sort of watched growing up. Toy Soldiers is the one where it's like terrorists take over a boarding school, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's kind of a believable film. I think everyone should seek it out. And hasn't it got Lewis Gossett Jr.? Oh no, that was the other film I was trying to remember. He was in Memphis Belle.
Ah, right. Okay. Yeah. That chick flick about World War II. Okay.
Yeah. I haven't seen that film in a while, but I remember it being kind of good. So yeah, we've established all the characters. One thing I had to flag up: what's with the convoluted gate system at their house? So
I could not. I mean, the amount of work that must have gone in to set that up. What was it? Is that a homage to something? Is it?
Well, they're saying there's somewhere I read saying it's obviously foreshadowing to one of the traps that they get involved in later in the film, but that still doesn't explain who built it, why did you build it, and the amount of work that goes into it. So you've got a bowling ball that scares a chicken into laying an egg, which then blows up a balloon, which then pulls the gate back. Do they have to reset it?
No, it sets off a sprinkler.
Of course, it sets off the sprinkler. And so do they have to set it up every time somebody to let somebody in? Is it a once a day thing? It just seems, it's great, it's quirky, but what's the point?
Hey, Chunk, when you're on your way in, can you bring in the bowling ball and set it up for the next person?
And pick up the egg as well. I was just a bit sort of distracted by that, saying, yeah, that's really fun, but I'm not sure why it's in there. The other thing that I picked up on rewatching it this time is I love the fact that the sort of recurring joke that Mikey mispronounces everything, but I never noticed that his mum does it the same as well.
Oh, I didn't notice that. When's she doing that? Is that
when she's going around the house? I think it's when she's telling Brand, Josh Brolin's character, off for something, and he's like, "Don't you mean this, Mum?" She's like, "That's what I said, Brandon." So yeah, that's a nice little subtle sort of tick that they've put in there. But it's also got there's a great the thing that I forgot about, and I'm sure you've said it to me in the past, is that line from Brandon when they tie him up with his 80s muscle stretcher spring thing, when he's like, "I'm going to hit you so hard, when you wake up, your clothes are going to be out of fashion."
Yeah, it's a great line.
So then they get on their adventure. But I don't know whether now's the time to talk about product placement alert.
So much pop culture references as well. It's like they're trying to date the film.
Well, yeah, there's the bit where Brand says, "Oh, I have to get to the store and buy Pampers for all us kids." Seems like everyone's wearing Nike shoes. And they even managed to feature Cyndi Lauper's music video for the film.
Yeah, so not just plugging the music on the soundtrack, but also actually showing the music video and plugging the fact that MTV is massive.
Yes, indeed. So we get into that classic Spielberg sort of motif of kids on their bikes going through the woods. Which will obviously mention the Stranger Things sort of homage later on. But then we're introduced to sort of, a minor villain of sleazy Troy. How do we know Troy's evil? It's because he's wearing a country club visor.
Oh, amazing wardrobe on that guy. And he is such a douche.
He's total douche. But yeah, first sign of evil, it's that lovely country club visor. He's rich, he's evil, he can't be trusted. And then, yeah, they're on their adventure. You're meeting I don't know who's more terrifying in this film. Is it Mama Fratelli or is it Sloth? That woman always terrified me as a child.
The only thing we serve is tongue. You boys like tongue?
Yeah, I think Sloth definitely just, I think it's the presentation of them, you know, and I think, as I was talking before about how I think Spielberg always gets the right balance of stuff. So they are believable criminals, but they are, from a child's point of view, you know, they should be probably a little bit more terrifying than they are. They're still a bit sort of like cuddly, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's a very fine balance between them being terrifying. I mean, you know, one point you've got the brothers squabbling over pizza, pointing guns at each other, and it's hilarious. And then the next, they're threatening to feed a child's hand into a blender. So, you know, it's a fine line that Donner manages to balance in this.
But that's what I like. I like the balancing act that's going on, and I love the banter between these young actors, that the performance they're able to get out, where Mouth is like teasing Chunk so he'll open the door, and how like Chunk's been following this, and like everyone's got their own little role to play. It's just, I don't know how they did this, whether or not they got the kids to spend time with each other, but it all just seems so natural. All the relationships really work well. And so when you throw them into this setting with this shack, you know, which they filmed during a hurricane because the weather was so up and down in the area. But when you throw them in with the Fratellis, everybody's been introduced, everyone's got their role, and even the Fratellis are. So then you're in the film, aren't you?
Yeah, it's weird how you just remember certain things. Like I remember them getting served that like brown water and just the random things like the freezer full of ice cream with the stiff. It's just all the sort of things that sort of, yeah, it is borderline. You've got some nice little sort of family friendly scares in there. Yeah, it's a great setup, and then they're quickly on their adventure. I don't know if there's it's probably not going to mean anything to our listeners, but there's one thing I picked up on this, Charlie, when Mama Fratelli, when Mikey's sort of trying to find the entrance, and he has to says, you know, he needs to go to the toilet. She goes, "Stay to the right! Stay to the right!" Which is a joke that's played in one of our favourite films, Loaded Weapon. So for fans of Loaded Weapon, you'll appreciate that. You kind of sort of forget that Chunk is separated from the main bunch, but that really allows for some great comic potential. So even though I've seen this film numerous times, I was, you know, giggling all over again when the Fratellis are interrogating him and they're getting him to tell everything, and like, you know, from the very start, and he's just literally telling them every single story about every wrong thing he did, about pushing his sister down the stairs and blaming it on the dog, and pretending to be sick in the cinema, and I was just wetting myself, because it's a, you know, great comic timing from the kid that plays him, Jeff Cohen.
In 4th grade, I stole my Uncle Max's toupee and I glued it on my face when I played Moses in my Hebrew school play. In 5th grade, I knocked my sister Edie down the stairs and I blamed it on the dog.
Still so typical of what would come out of a child in that position.
Yeah, and but yeah, it's a great sort of, it's a very well written character, because everyone had that mate at school that was a complete bullshitter and was always telling these completely fabricated, unbelievable stories. But we lived in a magical time before the internet, where you couldn't check if these stories were true or not. And I really liked the cheeky Gremlins reference that, you know, when Chunk's telling his story to the police, it's like, oh yeah, and just about the time you told us about those little monsters that got wet and multiplied. So yeah, there's a good little in-joke there. But yeah, I think there's we've covered a lot of what makes the film great, and you've got all the different sort of the traps in there that have that Indiana Jonesy type feeling, you know, all the sort of the falling rocks and floor that falls through. And then you get to that sort of the big sort of set piece with the pirate ship, which apparently, and you'll probably divulge more on, they built a full working pirate ship on set and hid it from the kids to get like a genuine reaction from them.
I love that. Just tricks like that. The fact that there's like, no, we're going to go and do it. And I think this links back to the powerhouse that was Donner and Spielberg at the time. It was like, we're going to do this, and they did tricks with the budget. Like they picked the town, whatever it's called.
Astoria.
But it is a great setting. But they said they had access to the beach. They were able to build this boat, and they had this, this location that was truly amazing. And to get that reaction out of the kids, it was a great little trick.
I don't know if this is true or not, but I read that they made, that final bit before they get down to the pirate ship, they go through all those like water slides and stuff. And apparently once they'd finished filming, the crew would all like have a go on the water slides at the end of every day as a sort of like a stress relief thing.
Yeah, it looks awesome.
I mean, we haven't even I realize we haven't touched on Sloth much, really. I mean, yeah, he's terrifying. He's a tragic figure. And I don't know about you, but I really can't see you getting away with a character like Sloth in a film today.
You try to make your frosting look a little bit rugged. A little bit.
Chocolate.
Shall we say?
They just picked a random guy. Apparently he was like an American football player, and gave him this like deformed animatronic head to make him this like grotesque sort of deformed person. It's like, I think that's a little bit on the nose there.
Well, yeah, it was amazing because obviously they show the prosthetic work and the makeup in the making of video.
Yeah.
And yeah, the guy's enormous to begin with. And then it was like, and he had to put this thing on each time. And when they were in the water, they were saying to the kids, don't get water on Sloth, because whenever he gets water on his face, you have to go back to makeup.
Don't get water on Sloth, you'll make him very angry.
And it was stuff like that. But each time he got water on him, he had to go back in, and it was like 4 hours in makeup. But this guy was a legendary footballer, but I get the feeling that the guy passed away.
He did, yeah. And I was looking into this, and I think he passed away quite not too long after this. I think it was like 89, maybe.
Well, yes, they're talking about it in this. There's a few lines in this making of which kind of date it, because they're like saying, nowadays with like latest technology like DVDs, So I think this was obviously made at some point during the 90s. But yeah, they're all talking about him with a lot of reverence and in past tense. So
yeah,
but he'll always be remembered.
Well, what he will always be remembered for, and it's probably the reason that, getting back to my product placement, that every person from Britain knows what a Baby Ruth is. Sorry, I couldn't resist. So yeah, ends with that great set piece on the boat with One-Eyed Willie, and I'm saying that with a straight face. More sort of booby traps or booty traps as Data calls them. Then the thing that I realised this time is you've got the ending on the beach, and the evil country club developers turn up, sign the paperwork, and then they discovered that Mikey's got this bag full of rubies and jewels in his marble bag that's going to save them. And then I always remember this as a kid, the ship breaks out of the cave and sails off into the sunset, and they all just sit there waving at it, looking at it majestically. And it's like, I was saying to myself, that ship is full of loot. Why is nobody going after it? It's like, we've got this tiny bag of jewels. Why is nobody... Get a boat. We're going after it. Because who's steering the ship, but why aren't they going after it?
Well, there's something about this... There was something about the filming at the end. I mean, I'm not going to even talk about the octopus. You can follow up on that in a moment. But apparently that was added... The scene on the beach at the end was added at the end. So... Or that thing of the boat, it was all... Well, you tell us, George, because it's a disconfigured. There's a lot of talk about there was a thing with an octopus.
Yes.
So what happened?
So there's... Because there's even a scene at the end where they're reunited with their parents, and they're all talking about their adventures, and Data goes, oh yeah, and there was this giant octopus... And just carries on talking, and you're like, hang on, there wasn't a scene with a giant octopus. But they did film a scene, so when the kids come out of the water chutes and land in front of the pirate ship, there was supposed to be a dramatic scene where this giant octopus turned up and started grabbing the kids. And I think Data managed to like squirt something or fire some sort of gadget that scares off the octopus. But I think it was one of those things that it looked, the animatronics for the octopus looked so ropey, they just decided to cut it out. But bizarrely, it somehow turned up on like a TV edited version of the film when they played it on American TV like 5 years later. There was a version that included that scene. So some people have seen it, and obviously there's that line in the film that confuses everybody. But yeah, the sort of cast and crew sort of joke about it because it's sort of become that sort of legendary thing of, what happened with the octopus?
Yeah, well, Donna says that it was his call. But from the way he talks about it and what you just said, it was a last-minute editing decision. So it kind of explains there was probably a version of it going around. And obviously, there was a TV edit.
Yeah.
But the way he described it, he said, yeah, it was just, how did he describe it? I think it was almost like a dig at whoever designed it. You know, he wasn't saying that it was a bad decision to try and do it. It was like, it was a poorly conceived mechanism, is how he describes it. So it just didn't look good enough. But I remember thinking that line that Data comes out with about an octopus, that's another hark back to kids have a tendency to embellish certain things. So I think I think that's why they left it in. They were like, you know, he's just excited and he's like saying there was loads of this and there's pirates and there was traps and there was an octopus. So it kind of makes it, that very far-fetched thing. But, no, the only thing I'd like to say about the ending about how Rosalita saves the day, and I'm just wondering what President Trump would think of Rosalita arriving in this country as, is she got a visa? She doesn't speak any English, but there's that great comedy with Mouth explaining to her that this is where you store the drugs, and there's the dad is a sexual deviant and keeps all of his toys in the loft, and that if she misbehaves, it's brilliant. I forgot how funny that bit is, and it really shows Feldman, how good an actor he is.
Well, yeah, it's hilarious, but again, that's what I was sort of referencing when I was talking about. In the first 5-10 minutes, you've got drug references, you've got swearing, and I was reading about this. Apparently, in the Spanish version, I think he's talking Italian to her. So they flipped it. But yeah, in talking of the the duels, I've got a boring, as it could be boring, but a piece of trivia from the lovely people at IMDb. So I've said, obviously they've got this bag of jewels, but then they let this ship sail off into the sunset full of treasure. But according to international maritime salvage law, the rights to a salvage vessel and its contents go to person or persons who first successfully bring something off the vessel in question. So, since Mikey brought the jewels off the ship and everything on it belonged to him, apparently, according to maritime salvage law.
But he's not greedy.
He's not greedy. But yeah, then I suppose we are veering into sequel territory. So this film has been mooted a sequel, a Broadway show, a animated spin-off. I think they talked about at one point it was going to be the kids of the original kids. They were going to, I think it was even up until a few, like 2 or 3 years ago, Richard Donner said, oh yeah, it's going to happen. We've got a script and we're working on it. But he's confirmed again recently saying, no, it's not going to happen. But, I like to think, what if? And, that moment when you've got everyone's reunited on the beach and Chunk goes up to Sloth and he says, you're going to come and live with me now. You're going to come and live with me and my family. So for me, the real sequel that I want, and I think everyone else does, I want to spin off the further adventures of Chunk and Sloth. Maybe a sitcom. They could get into like different adventures. They
get back together. They're living in the city. This is what I'm thinking. So like Chunk's still doing the bullshit and Sloth has a heart of gold. And so maybe Sloth could be helping Chunk get the ladies. He's the one who's got the chat and he's giving him help, but he's ugly on the outside, but he's beautiful on the inside. It could be that type of that type of buddy film. Let's make it happen, George.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've just got like, it's almost like the opening of Commando. You could see like Sloth carrying really heavy things, but then all of a sudden he's having an ice cream with Chunk and he gets the ice cream in his face. He's scaring people, but then Chunk's, reassuring them all. Yeah, I think there's a lot to it. And according to the novelization of the film, it confirms that Chunk's parents actually do adopt Sloth and going as far to throw him a bar mitzvah. So, I think there's a lot of potential there.
That's awesome. But I do love that actor. What do you say his name was? The Chunk guy? It's
Jeff Cohen.
Yeah, because I think he is so in the making of video, he's so on the nose about it. I mean, he pretty much on the DVD extra, he says, I'm so glad to be part of this film. I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for being chosen for that, So, and then there's just one bit in the making of video where you see it's like a case of the two Coreys, and I'm not talking about Corey Haim, just that there's some footage of Corey and then there's some footage of him later, and you're like, have you lost weight or had face work? I don't know if there's like...
Has somebody been to rehab?
There's something going on there. It just looks a bit weird. But yeah, and we mentioned it earlier. I do remember reading the Empire special when it was it 25 years? Yeah, and seeing pictures of them all and how they'd all changed, and as the making of calls itself the making of a cult classic, and it is. And what is fascinating is, and I don't think this is arrogance on Donner's part, but Richard Donner came out and he said that he knew when he made it that it was going to be a classic. And I think that's just, he said, I'd made a few films, I'd done this, I'd done that, but I just had the working with Steven and the energy that we got from the kids and performances. He says that was one of the reasons we had to take out the octopus, because I felt everything else was so top draw.
Well, no, he said as part of that Empire reunion thing, there's a short YouTube video of them on where they all meet up, and they're interviewing Donner, and he admits, he goes, he says to the interview, he goes, don't tell the kids this, but it's the greatest memory of my life working on this film. He goes, it's the best experience on any film I've done. Which, I say, for the man that made Superman the movie, made
all the
lethal weapons. He made Scrooged, and yeah, he's got quite a back catalogue of great films. I think that says a lot. You did mention two Coreys, and that leads us into regular feature Coulda Woulda Shoulda. There wasn't many alternative casting options for this film. However, the other Corey that we talk about, so in the 80s/early 90s, there was the two Coreys that most famously appeared in The Lost Boys. So you've got Corey Feldman, who was in this, and you also have Corey Haim. Corey Haim actually auditioned for the role of Mouth and lost out to Corey Feldman, but that's how they met. They met at the audition together, and that's where they started their lifelong friendship. So there you go.
And went on to make such classics as License to Drive, Dream a Little Dream, and then obviously, The Lost Boys. But maybe, unless you're friends with the Glendinings, you probably don't know the two Coreys as well as George and I. Let's just say that.
Spent a lot of time watching those films, whether we wanted to or not. I think we just should close up by saying, well, I think we've both sort of confirmed, does this film still hold up? Yes, definitely. When I watched it the other day, and I suppose it's a bit of a depressing point, but I didn't check my phone once when I was watching the film. It really zips along. It really, engages you.
Yeah, you're engaged.
Yeah,
me too. Maybe I think it's difficult to separate the nostalgia, but for me, I'm in the zone, and I'm in my head. I'm in this like dreamy memory sort of thing, but I'm not leaving the film when I'm watching a classic like this.
And it makes me, it's the issue with nostalgia, it's that longful, that pain of longing as we've talked about in the past. But why don't they make films like this anymore? I don't want to, sound like a broken record, because we talk about the current state of the film industry and how much of a hold it has. It's all about that brand, that name recognition, that franchise property. But they don't make classic kids films like these anymore. You look over the highest grossing blockbusters over the past 20 years, and it's the top 20, top 30, they're all either comic book films, animation, so like Shrek, Frozen, Despicable Me. And the only thing that you've really got close is, ironically, it's Pirates of the Caribbean, a film about pirates and treasure. But there's nothing, where are all the movies, the kids' movies about kids going on adventure? That's the thing that I think's sad thing about it. It's a film that, the reason this film is close to so many people's hearts is that wish fulfillment is that could be us. I could see myself getting into an adventure like that.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about, the Spielberg effect. So you have this thing that he just creates where they do look like, regular type people that as you say, wish fulfillment, or you can empathize. You can see that sort of, as you say, that brother dynamic, having a friend like that. The pressures, the family pressures interceding with, uprooting your life and having to move, those sort of things. He gets it spot on. But you're right. That's why I asked the question: was this a golden era for not just kids films, but for Spielberg and films of the like? With did he do the last? What was it? Last Starfighter or Flight the Navigator? Those sort of 80. Those were kids films, and there was Gremlins, and there was Back to the Future, and I think maybe it's gone down the route of animation because cynically, it's what works. It's what probably makes the most profit.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a real shame. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's gone on to inspire. It's been inspired by the Goonies or it's been homaged, but the only one I can think of recently is a film I watched on, I think it was Netflix recently, called Project Almanac, which is a bit like a mixture of the Goonies meet across with Back to the Future. So it's all done. The most annoying thing is it's like a found footage film, but it's about these bunch of like young kids, young teenagers, I should say, that discover this time traveling technology. So it's all that wish fulfillment. They go back in time and win the lottery and become popular at school. And there's some really nice beats in there, but ultimately it's flawed by, there's some terrible plot holes as it can happen with a time travel film, and the found footage style doesn't work. But that's one of the few films that I can think of that tries to do that sort of that template of, kids on an adventure, and has that trying to recapture some of that Spielberg magic. And obviously there was Super 8 by J.J. Abrams. I think that was even produced by Spielberg. But that
definitely involved with that, yeah.
I haven't watched that since it was released. I'm actually quite tempted after, reacquainting myself with the Goonies again to actually go back and watch Super 8. And, we can't really finish this podcast without talking about Stranger Things, because that is, Yes, it's a huge, obviously, Stranger Things is a great homage to not just this, but E.T., Stephen King, so many sort of 80s things. And it's weird when I was watching, that bit where they first, are cycling through the woods, I just couldn't help thinking of Stranger Things, probably because it's the most result. I've watched it fairly recently. And bizarrely enough, I saw that Sean Astin, the guy who plays, Mikey, and Samwise Gamgee from Lord of the Rings, is actually going to appear as a reoccurring character in the second series of Stranger Things. So that's a nice little further sort of homage there.
Great, and shows that they're self-aware.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, I think the makers of that have been quite open with their inspirations for that show. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to series 2 of that. I think that's out later this year.
Well, it was so much fun to go back and watch this. It was, I had fun watching the making of, which I strongly advise people to check out, because it's funny, you hear these crazy stories of what happened. Like apparently Spielberg arranged. There's a bit where Corey's doing about the water pressure. Yeah. And he wanted to get a certain reaction out of him. And so what he did was he arranged for Michael Jackson to visit the set. And he basically told him just before he had to deliver that license, Michael's just arrived. And he came in. So like there was that, and there was the thing that they didn't tell the kids about the boat. So some very, very clever tricks. And when you see, as I say, you see Davy and Joey Pants just talking about how they got the parts because they didn't like each other. I love all of that stuff. So yeah, I mean, I don't think we haven't gone into too much detail, but this is just such a great film. It's so enjoyable to go back and watch. It's like a warm blanket, and it's not a film you can tire of very easily, I don't think.
And I think, we've pretty much covered it in detail, but I think it's something that you could, I'm looking forward to introducing to my kids when they're the right age. I think it still holds up as a classic adventure story. So yeah, I think that's the strength of the film, that it stands the test of time. And I think I'd recommend it to, any kids today to watch.
And it's another reminder as to what safe pair of hands Steven Spielberg is. He gets great actors, he gets great performances out of any actor, and he strikes the right sort of balance between, he really knows how to push the limits of where to go and how scary it can be, how corny it can be, how exciting it can be, and how realistic it can be. I think, and it's a reminder to me because I think he's changed his style. He's got older, and he had that, as I say, he had that run during the 80s, and he's still obviously he'll go down in history as one of the greatest movie directors of all time. But this was really a real sweet spot for him. This era of 80s films was amazing.
Yeah, I was thinking, because I saw Spielberg's take on the BFG recently, and yeah, it's not terrible, but it's not amazing. It feels a bit like, I suppose it's a bit like Tim Burton and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It seems like it's, a dream partnership, but then in reality, it seems like a bit of a missed opportunity. So whilst it's enjoyable, I don't know, there was just something about the BFG film recently, because I was like, oh yeah, it's great to see Spielberg back doing a kids film. But yeah, something a little bit off. I don't know if maybe should stick to the more serious stuff these days, but maybe it was just too much of a reliance on CGI. Maybe that was it. Possibly. But yeah, I think we should round it up there. I think if you haven't seen Goonies recently, go out and seek it out.
That was the Goonies, and we will be back next month. And we will be confirming what we're going to do. We've got a feel for what we're going to cover next, George, would you say?
Well, I mean, being summer, I think we should do a blockbuster. And as people probably know, who know me too well, I have a bit of an interest in Batman, and a key film for me growing up was Tim Burton's Batman, the original Batman from 1989. So I think, we'll talk about that.
I'm totally on board with that. I think, obviously it's the summer. There's a lot of comic book films coming out. This goes back then. And I think it's also just a nice, gentle nod of the hat to Adam West, who recently passed away.
You filthy criminals.
The 60s Batman, we're not covering that. We are actually covering the 1989 Tim Burton film. But as I say, it's true, isn't it, George? It's just, a great actor. Who's passed on. Yeah,
I mean, I wrote a little, a minor few words about Adam West. Yeah, I say I'm a big Batman fan, and it was quite sad news to hear. And, it's similar to Roger Moore. He seemed like a genuinely lovely person, and everyone's sharing, some treasured memories of him. So, yeah, check out my little sort of piece on the blog, but I'm sure we will touch on Adam West when we talk about Batman 1989, because I think it sort of goes hand in hand. It's a reason why that film was sort of a reaction to the camp 60s version.
Yeah, and gave us Jack Nicholson, Michael Keaton, and so much more. So look forward to that in our next episode. For this episode, I've been Charlie McGee.
I've been George McGee.
And we hope you've enjoyed that, and we'll see you next time.
Check us out on retroramble.blog.
Yes, sorry, and of course all of our social media channels on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram.
We're still not on Instagram.
I know, but I'm still just going to tell people to try and find us.
Okay, thank you and goodbye.